The wind of the desert carried dust across the dry land as the sun burned above the horizon. In that empty stretch of land, a small ranch stood between two tall hills. The place belonged to a cowboy named Jake. He was tall, calm, and known for his quiet kindness more than his words. He lived alone with his horses and cattle, far from the noise of any town. One hot afternoon, Jake heard a strange sound near the water creek behind his barn. It was not the cry of an animal. It was soft and broken, like someone whispering for help. When he went closer, he saw a young Apache girl lying near the rocks. Her clothes were torn from travel, her hands covered in dust, and her eyes half open. She looked frightened but too weak to move. Jake dropped to one knee beside her. "Hey, you're all right now," he said gently, offering her water from his canteen. She blinked at him, uncertain, as if expecting harm. She had heard stories about white men, stories that told her to run from them. But Jake's eyes were calm, not cruel. She took a small sip and whispered her name. "Nita," she said. For the next few days, Jake took care of her in his small ranch house. He cooked simple food, gave her his spare blanket, and never asked where she came from. She watched him quietly, confused by his behavior. He didn't shout or make demands. He worked from sunrise to sunset, feeding the animals, fixing fences, and returning to make sure she was fine. On the fourth morning, Nita spoke more. You don't take women to eat?" she asked seriously. Jake stopped mid-step, holding a plate of food. "What?" he said, confused. She tilted her head, eyes wide and honest. "My grandmother say white cowboys take women, then eat them after they choose mate. That's what she say." Jake laughed so hard he almost dropped the plate. It was a deep laugh, the kind he hadn't had in months. "No, we don't eat nobody," he said through his laughter. "Who told you that nonsense?" Nita frowned, still unsure. "But you hunt cows, horses, wild deer. You use knife. How you not eat woman if she yours?" He shook his head, smiling kindly. "We don't own people, and I sure don't eat them. I just take care of the ranch, and I guess I help strangers who fall near my creek." Her cheeks turned red. She looked down, embarrassed. "Then what you do when you pick a woman?" she asked, voice small like a curious child. "We talk," he said softly, sitting near her. "We work together. Maybe we marry. We build a home. That's what we do." Nita looked away toward the horizon, thinking about that. In her tribe, love was something fierce and proud. Men proved themselves by hunting or protecting their women. But this man spoke about kindness and work, not war. She didn't understand it, but she wanted to. Over the next days, she began to help around the ranch. At first, she only swept the floor or filled water buckets. But soon, she learned to feed the horses and bring hay to the barn. Jake watched her with quiet respect. He never told her what to do. He only showed her once, and she learned fast. She had strong hands and eyes that saw every small thing, like when a horse was hurt or when a storm was coming. One evening, as the sky turned gold, she watched Jake fixing a broken fence. Sweat ran down his neck, his shirt dusty, his face calm. She asked, "Why you live alone?" He didn't answer right away. After a while, he said, "The war took my people. The ranch is all I got left." She nodded slowly. She understood loss. Her own tribe had been forced off land. She had run during a raid and got lost. That's how she ended up near his ranch. She told him that quietly, staring at the fire that night. He listened without a word. When she finished, he said, "You're safe here. No one's coming to harm you." For the first time, she smiled at him, a real one. "And you still not eat women?" she teased softly. He chuckled again. "Nope, not even during mating season." That made her laugh for the first time, the sound like music in the quiet desert. From that day, something gentle started between them. Not love yet, but understanding. She would leave wildflowers near his table. He would make sure her blanket was folded neat each morning. They didn't need many words. One afternoon, a group of cowhands rode past the ranch. They saw Nita standing by the corral, brushing a horse. One of them laughed and said loud, "Hey, Jake, you got yourself a little wild desert bird, huh?" Jake's face turned hard. "Watch your mouth," he said simply. His tone made them quiet. Nita looked down, unsure what it meant. Later she asked him, "Why you angry?" "Because they were rude to you," he said. "But I am Apache. They think I am wild." "You're not wild," he said quietly. "You're just free." There's a difference. That night she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking of those words. Free. It felt like a word she never owned before. Days turned to weeks. Nita learned how to ride a horse, how to cook stew, even how to mend fences. Jake began to talk more too. about the stars, about cattle, about how the wind carried stories if you listened long enough. Once, while they sat near the fire, she asked, "In your world, who decides who belongs to who?" He smiled faintly. "No one belongs to anyone. You choose to stay or you choose to leave." She looked at the flames, then whispered, "Then maybe I choose to stay." He didn't say anything, just looked at her with quiet eyes full of warmth, but something in his heart shifted. A storm came a few days later. Lightning cracked the sky and rain hit hard. One of the horses broke loose and ran toward the cliffs. Without thinking, Nita ran after it. Jake shouted her name, running after her through the mud. When he reached her, she was holding the horse's rope near the cliff edge, her feet slipping. He grabbed her arm and pulled her back just in time. When they finally fell to the ground, both soaked and gasping, she laughed through the rain. "You saved me," she said. "Of course," he said softly. "What did you think I'd do, eat you?" She smiled, rain on her cheeks. "I don't believe that anymore." The storm passed, leaving the air cool and clean. Jake helped her back to the house, wrapped her in a blanket, and sat near the fire again. She leaned her head against his shoulder, tired but safe. He didn't move. Outside, the wind whispered across the plains. Inside, the quiet between them felt warm. She had come from fear and found something she never expected. Not a legend of cowboys eating women, but a man who worked hard, spoke kind, and made her feel like she belonged. And as the firelight danced, she whispered one more time, half teasing, half serious, "Maybe your people not so bad." He smiled at that, answering softly, "Maybe yours not either." Morning sunlight touched the dusty land after the storm. Water glistened in small puddles around the ranch. Jake stepped outside to check the fences, but he kept looking back toward the house where Nita still rested by the fire. He had never felt like this before. He had helped travelers before, strangers who came and went, but Nita was different. She laughed at his jokes, argued with his logic, and worked beside him as if she had always been there. When she came out later with her hair still damp from washing, she looked around with bright eyes. "Everything smell new," she said softly. Jake smiled. "Storm cleaned the world," he said. Nita followed him around that morning, asking questions about every small thing. "Why this cow have rope on neck? Why you talk to horse like friend? Why you not scared of snake near fence?" He answered each one patiently. She was curious about everything, and he found himself enjoying her company more than he expected. After breakfast, she brought out the old guitar from the corner. "What this?" she asked, running her fingers along the strings. He took it gently, tuned it, and played a soft tune. She watched him with wide eyes, amazed at the sound. "You make wood sing," she said quietly. "It's music," he said. "Helps a man feel less alone." She listened for a long time, her head tilted, eyes soft. "In my tribe," she said after a while, "we sing to mountains. Maybe same thing." "Maybe it is," he replied. As days passed, the bond between them grew like a small fire that refused to fade. Nita laughed often now. She rode her horse better than most men Jake knew, and she even learned to throw a rope. Sometimes when she missed, she would frown, and he would tease her lightly. "You're not supposed to catch me," he'd say. She would roll her eyes and say, "Maybe next time I try." One evening, while they worked near the barn, a dust cloud appeared far away. Jake squinted and saw riders coming, 3 men from the nearby town. They stopped near the gate and shouted, "Jake, you got company?" He wiped his hands and walked out to meet them. They were neighbors, men who traded cattle and supplies. They looked curious when they saw Nita standing near the barn door. One of them said, "You keeping an Apache now?" Jake's eyes went cold. "She's my guest," he said flatly. The men exchanged looks. One of them laughed. "Guest or not, you be careful. Folks in town don't like her kind." Nita stood still, her face calm but her eyes heavy. When the men left, she asked quietly, "Your people hate mine?" Jake sighed. "Not all of them, but some don't understand. They fear what they don't know." "They think I bring trouble?" she asked. He looked at her. "No, you bring peace." That night she sat by the window while Jake worked near the fire. She watched the stars, remembering her lost family and her old home. For a moment she felt like she didn't belong anywhere, not with her tribe, not with his people. But then she heard Jake humming the tune he played before, and something in her heart eased. She whispered to herself, "Maybe here is enough." A few days later, trouble came from the town. A local trader named Bill came to collect payment for tools Jake had ordered long ago. When he saw Nita helping with the horses, he sneered. "You letting that savage touch your animals?" Jake's hand tightened around the gate rope. "You best take your payment and leave," he said calmly. But Bill kept talking. "You're making a mistake, Cowboy. She'll run off with your horse one night. Can't trust her kind." Before Jake could answer, Nita stepped forward, her voice steady. "I don't steal." "I work?" Bill laughed. "Oh, she talks too. Maybe she thinks she's your wife now." Jake's voice turned hard. "Leave." Bill smirked but turned his horse around. "Suit yourself," he said. "Don't say we didn't warn you." Nita stood quietly as the man rode off. She looked at Jake. "Why you defend me?" He took a deep breath. "Because you don't deserve to be treated like that. No one does." She lowered her eyes. "In my tribe, men fight with weapons. You fight with words. Stronger that way." He smiled faintly. "Depends on the man." That night was quiet. Wind passed through the open window, carrying the scent of sage. Jake sat at the table, thinking about what had happened. He knew the town would talk. They always did. But he didn't care anymore. In the next few days, they avoided town. Jake taught Nita how to mark cattle, how to set traps for coyotes, and how to use a lasso properly. She learned fast, and soon she could do most of the ranch work alone. One afternoon, when Jake returned from the north field, he saw her standing on the fence rail, whistling to call the horses. They came running to her like she was one of them. He couldn't help smiling. She turned and saw him watching. "See, they listen," she said proudly. "Yeah," he said softly. "So do I." She tilted her head. "You say what?" He chuckled. "Nothing." The dry season came next. Days grew hotter and water grew scarce. One of the nearby creeks dried up, forcing Jake to ride far for fresh water. Nita insisted on going with him. They traveled together through long stretches of sand and dry bushes. At one point, they stopped near a small canyon. She pointed at the carvings on the rocks, old Apache symbols. "This place tells stories," she said. "People live, people love, then people gone. Only stories stay?" He nodded slowly. "Maybe that's how it is for everyone." On the way back, a rattlesnake startled their horses. Jake's horse reared up and he nearly fell. Nita grabbed the reins, steadying him just in time. He looked at her, surprised. She laughed softly. "Now I save you," she said. From then on, they were closer. Their silence became comfortable, filled with shared work and simple smiles. They no longer spoke about her leaving. Both knew she had already chosen to stay. Weeks later, the same trader returned, bringing men with him. They accused Jake of hiding an Apache thief. Jake faced them calmly. "You got no proof," he said. Bill spat on the ground. "Don't need proof. Just don't want her near our town." Before Jake could speak, Nita stepped forward. "Then I go," she said softly. "I not bring trouble to you." Jake's heart twisted. "You're not leaving," he said firmly. "They don't get to decide that," Bill sneered. "You going to fight us over her?" Jake looked at them without fear. "If I have to." The silence stretched. Then one of the men muttered, "Come on, Bill. It's not worth it." They turned and rode away, dust rising behind them. When they were gone, Nita turned to Jake. "You risk for me again," she said quietly. "Worth it," he replied simply. She looked at him for a long time, eyes shining in the sunlight. "Then maybe I belong here," she whispered. From that day, no one came to bother them again. The town learned to leave the quiet cowboy and the Apache girl alone. They worked side by side through summer and cold seasons, building something that didn't need words until a small home, a shared life, and peace that neither had known before. Sometimes travelers passed by and told stories of a strange pair living out in the desert, a cowboy and an Apache girl who ran a ranch together. They laughed when they heard it. At night, when stars filled the sky, she would still tease him. "You sure cowboys not eat women?" He would smile, pretending to think. Maybe only on special days. She would laugh and throw a small stick at him. Then they would sit in silence, listening to the wind and the soft sounds of the land that had once been wild but now felt like home. And in that quiet corner of the Wild West, where two different worlds met, they proved that kindness could cross any line, even the one drawn between a cowboy and an Apache girl who once believed men ate their women during mating season.